The latest intel says Bob Chesney, Eli Drinkwitz, or does Pat Kraft have a wild card ready to play?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State football. And thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Help me welcome back Penn State beat reporter Pat Koerbler over at Black Shoe Diaries, as we're going to talk Penn State's coaching search, but we're going to go in depth here. It's not only about that. It's the Franklin to Virginia Tech effect. What does that mean? We'll get to that later on in the show. Pat Kraft, does he have a wild card up his sleeve? We're talking about names that people really aren't discussing at all, but the latest, the ones that are getting the most attention. James Madison's Bob Chesney and Missouri's Eli Drinkwitz. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Friendly reminder to let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation. Pat, these hires are certainly going to be scrutinized one way or another. I've kind of already gone on the record saying, what does Eli Drinkwitz give to Penn State that James Franklin already didn't, right? If you want to compare their big game record, well, Eli Drinkwitz is no different. And the thing with Bob Chesney, I like the idea of his upside, right? This is why you make the move, because you want to increase your ceiling if you're Penn State. James Franklin had maxed it out. If we're comparing and contrasting these two candidates, yes, you're rolling the dice with either, but I feel like you have a better chance. You have more potential with someone like Bob Chesney, who's won at places like Holy Cross, and James Madison. But is he really ready for this kind of program in Penn State? But there's also UCLA that apparently he's drawing a lot of interest from mutually. He's really interested in that UCLA job too.
Sure. I think for me, like, you can mention any candidate, right? Brent Key to Bob Chesney to Pat Fitzgerald to Manny Diaz to whoever. Like, all of these guys have warts, and that's what like Pat Kraft has to figure out is what warts are you willing to overlook, and perhaps even more importantly, like when talking with these coaches, because that's something that we as fans have to have some self-awareness of like, I don't have the ability to talk to Bob Chesney. I can't ask him about how would you make that jump from James Madison to Penn State? How would you, react with having the NIL budget that Penn State does compared to what you're dealing with at James Madison? I don't have the opportunity to talk to Eli Drinkwitz and say, hey, you're a Southern guy that was, born in Oklahoma, raised in Arkansas. How do you think that you could fit in Penn State talking to, boosters from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, New York City, and Washington?
We can make our assumptions about that.
Sure. And and trust me, I mean, this is what, day 722 of this coaching search. Like, we certainly have talked ourselves in circles about this stuff, but I just want to make sure that we, like, as we, talk about all this, these different candidates, say that we do have that self-awareness of like, Eli Drinkwitz might have a great answer for how he can, talk to boosters that are Northeast based. Bob Chesney might be able to talk about how he would, deal with NIL at Penn State and working at a school like Penn State. But yeah, on that same token, like I do have questions about, like, I know we were talking, sorry, I know I'm going a little bit in circles here, but I know that we were talking about before we got started here, like, how would Eli Drinkwitz like fit at Penn State? And I almost like kind of compare Penn State to like a Michigan, a top 8 to 12 job. In the Big Ten, kind of similar cultural profile. And I think if Michigan opened up and they went with Eli Drinkwitz, I would think to myself, okay, Eli Drinkwitz is a good coach. Is that really like the right fit? Like, I can't envision Eli Drinkwitz at a school like Michigan. And as we get closer and closer to this hiring, I like to think that we're 2-3 weeks away, maybe at most. I have a tough time seeing Drinkwitz's personality. He's a little bit brash, kind of just meshing with the Penn State boosters and the Penn State fan base in general. I think this week showed that the Penn State fan base is just like any other college fan base. They want a coach that like feels like they want to be there, that they truly care about the university. You saw the outpouring of support when for Terry Smith.
Just somebody who cares, somebody who puts the university, let's say not last. Okay. Yeah. That's to interject there. Because I agree with what you're saying. Terry Smith does himself a lot of favors and makes himself an intriguing candidate just because he appreciates the job and that he's positioned in and what position he's in. I've said that about James Franklin recently, just kind of, like if we look back, hindsight's 2020, but it just, the start of all of this was when James Franklin didn't seem like he had any interest. It didn't seem like he had any interest in wanting to be at Penn State.
Yeah. And right. Whether he did or didn't is only like half the battle. It's also the perception. And I think that's where like a lot of the frustration from fans with James came, that, what do we see of James like in the media half the time when Auburn would open or when USC would open or when Florida State would open, right? His name is always getting mentioned for this stuff. And like, as a fan, like you want to hear your coach come out and say like, I want to be at Penn State. This is my home. I love this place. I'm not expecting every coach to be like Terry Smith and break down and crying, but I think that the Penn State fan base does need someone that is unifying in that aspect. It doesn't have to be someone that's a Penn State graduate. It doesn't have to be a former Letterman, but who is that guy that has that personality that will come in here and say, I want to be at Penn State? Because, man, listen, these guys get paid millions of dollars. Being a college football coach is still really, really tough with all the politics you have to play with NIL, with re-recruiting your roster.
Everything.
Still with the idea of, hey, like, let's get these guys in education as well. Let's focus on academics, stuff like that. It is not a job. It is like truly a lifestyle, just how much they work and how little off time they have. So with that being the case, it's like, who really wants to be here? Who really wants this job? And I think like that's an important part that Pat Kraft is, trying to figure out when he's in these interviews. Does Eli Drinkwitz really want it? Does Bob Chesney really want it? I know that's like the question that you kind of asked. So I can certainly see like almost any perspective. Like there's very few candidates that if they are the hire for Penn State that I would be like, no, completely out on. Mm-hmm. I certainly get the idea behind Chesney though. I mean, he's a guy that I've been doing more and more research on.
Pennsylvania guy.
Yep. So he's won everywhere he's been, worked his way up from D3, which, I understand that usually you don't see someone jump from D3 to D2 to FCS to FBS. And someone like Chesney, who's never had, power 4 experience as coordinator or anything. But I don't know. I think that we look at coaching searches sometimes as like this, this science. Like if you check this and check this mark and you put these things together, it's going to make exactly what you want. And that's not how it goes. So long-winded way of saying like, I think that the interview process is really important. And I think Pat Kraft has, a very important job of trying to figure out, how each of these coaches fits and what is the best fit for Penn State.
Well, his job's on the line if he doesn't, right? He took this gamble, he took this risk, right, to improve or to keep Penn State, at least keep Penn State afloat, right? They're in contention for a conference title. It doesn't have to be national titles overnight, but it can't be a significant, well, hey, James Franklin's 9-3, 10-2 at Virginia Tech, which we will talk about later. And then Penn State's struggling to get to 6-6. Okay. Even though there's a discrepancy in the Big Ten versus the ACC, still, this move wasn't made lightly. So and when you bring in the national media perspective, because we can't help it, right? It's going to be scrutinized. Well, Bob Chesney hasn't proven himself at a legitimate program. Okay. Well, the answer to that I would say is look at Curt Cignetti and what he's done at Indiana. When you have the right alignment, when you have the right amount of resources, you can take any program anywhere. Yeah. And Bob Chesney literally taking over for Curt Cignetti, who was at James Madison. That's the easy, simple answer. Eli Drinkwitz, when I look at his potential hire, and again, what I'm hearing, so we've seen that Bob Chesney, it's on the record that he interviewed with Penn State again, and that it was a really good interview. So that but there's also the allure of UCLA. Like he really likes UCLA. So it's kind of down to, is he waiting on Penn State? Does he really want to be out in Los Angeles? And then Drinkwitz, I've had people, I've had a source continue to tell me, it's Drinkwitz to Penn State. It's happening. Get used to it. But then I also hear on the back end, okay, well, Drinkwitz is interested in Penn State, but he's also interested since Florida opened up, LSU, Auburn. And I'm not saying he's going to be the number one target by any of those jobs, but Penn State, if they really do want to go with Drinkwitz, how does he feel about those other jobs comparatively when he's been a Midwest, Southeastern kind of guy? And then he's going to go up to the Northeast where he has no connections. And I'm not saying that the Penn State fan base is rabid and needs like, we need a national title tomorrow. But again, more something that says, hey, we're going in the right direction. So I think if you're Drinkwitz, you know that's an uphill battle. If you're Chesney, again, there's a bit of a homecoming here. And I would like to think that the donors, that the fan base, at least myself personally, will give a little bit of a grace period to Chesney, because I know there's going to be an uphill battle just adjusting from literally James Madison to Penn State.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think it all comes back to like that fit. Like one of the things that, we talk about with James Franklin getting fired was that, why would you fire a coach that went 10-2 and, had you right on the precipice of playing the national championship game and things like that. And then you respond back with like, okay, like lost to UCLA, lost to Northwestern, all these things.
Or how about 0-16 against every big game since 2017?
Yeah, but right, a big reason why Kraft was able to pull the trigger when he did, the reason why he did it after Northwestern game was you saw the fan reaction. Like you lose the fan base like that, it's really tough to bounce back. So I say all that because not that you need to make a hire that completely just appeases the fan base. Like I think the most important thing for Kraft is just, make the right hire. Like I know there's a lot of talk out there, like with Bob Chesney in particular about, well, he came in second or third for Virginia Tech. Are you really going to hire someone that, was second or third at Virginia Tech when they're hiring James Franklin? How does that look? It's like, you can't care about the optics in like that sense. But I do think that there is like a case of, you need to understand like the fan base.
Still to come on this episode, we are going to talk about the wild cards that Pat Kraft could play. Brian Hartline or an NFL coach? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back. There's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot and an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets. That's right, $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And that can be used on anything. NBA, NFL, college football. Lines are available for Penn State football this weekend against Nebraska. Penn State is a 9.5-point favorite, minus 365 on the money line, plus 285 if you're thinking Nebraska for the upset. Total is set at 44.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com and the FanDuel app. And remember, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Again, I go back to Drinkwitz. I just greatly question a brash Southerner, how much leash he's going to get. Yeah. Because, like I have no doubts that Drinkwitz, if he gets the job, he comes here at his press conference, like those press conferences, almost always the coach wins the fan base over. Like I remember like when Brian Harrison from Boise State got hired at Auburn, and it was like same idea. He gets announced. It's like, what? We're hiring this guy from Idaho, kills the press conference. Auburn fans love him. And that didn't work out. But I say all this because I think that Drinkwitz would do really well at his press conference. And I think that he would win a lot of the fan base over. But it's everything that happens after that that's like the important part. And that's even like the case with like this grand slam hire, the home run hire and stuff like that. The point of the coaching search is not to win like the press conference or to win the coaching, like the coaching hire cycle. It's to find the best football coach, to find the best fit for Penn State. So I just have a lot of questions about Drinkwitz and the fit, personality wise, culturally, just if it makes sense for both parties. Cause like, that's the other side of it. Like, this is not it. This is a two-way avenue. Like it's not just Penn State picking Drinkwitz, it's Drinkwitz picking Penn State too. So
there's also, it's making connections within Penn State, but also again, recruiting, being able to sell Penn State, Pennsylvania. Again, I think James Franklin was really good at that. being able to market Penn State. I think Bob Chesney, I would like to be confident that Bob Chesney could do that as well. And again, he's already starting to make connections within. Everybody talks about how important the DMV is. Again, that's a Franklin topic, so we'll get to that in just a moment. Wild card now. Let's pivot to that, because Bob Chesney, Eli Drinkwitz, they seem like the obvious choices, so to speak. Brent Key is still out there to an extent. Jeff Brom's working on an extension. He isn't with Louisville. People are saying that that's actually Penn State's best available candidate. So be it. When I think of wild card names, okay, well, Mike Elko's off the list. Kalen DeBoer immediately replaces that SEC coach of you have long shot. I am saying there is little to no chance, but you're saying there's a chance. In theory, yes, there is. But I think if Penn State gets the sense that, well, it's not likely that he's going to lose to Auburn. I don't need to go down there. How about likelier wild cards? Brian Hartline over at Ohio State. Brian Daboll, ex-New York Giants head coach. Here's one that I'll just throw out there, and it's going to sound crazy because it's not being reported. And I did check with a source just to say, hey, what's the sense around it? But because he had a working relationship with Pat Kraft, Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. Does he, right? I mean, he's a defensive coordinator, so would he want a head coaching job? And the way that college football is evolving to look and mimic more of the NFL itself. So maybe there's some appeal there. Again, they work together at Boston College. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm just throwing it out as, whoa, hey, here's an off the wall one. So who would your wild card be, or who would you say would be the most likely if Pat Kraft doesn't get either of Chesney or Drinkwitz? Where does Penn State go from there?
Hafley be super intriguing. Back in the day, like during the 2020 season when Penn State, completely imploded to start the first 5 games, like I was all in on Chesney at that, or excuse me, not Chesney. I was all in on Hafley at that point. So obviously things didn't work out at Boston College. He decided to take his talents to the NFL and seems to be doing a really good job there. I think my wild card guy, though, and you did mention him, is Brian Daboll. And I know that greatly angers Giants fans. So listen, I understand he was not. I understand he was not a good NFL head coach, but that's like kind of the prerequisite for an NFL head coach coming a college coach is that they didn't work out as an NFL head coach. Like that's how it works.
Yeah.
And I understand that, right? Why he failed is more important than the failing itself. And right, why he failed, if you listen to Giants fans, it was, he wasn't hard enough on the team, but yet was a fiery guy and was yelling at assistants and would berate players, but yet would give other players the benefit of the doubt at times. It just wasn't consistent in creating a culture, which I understand. In the NFL, that's hard. And I also understand the bigger picture of college football with, can Brian Daboll, someone who's only spent 1 year in college since his GA days at Michigan State in the 90s, can he deal with NIL? Can he deal with the politics? Those things that I mentioned earlier, making sure that guys are going to class and getting education and stuff like that. Just all the different hats that you have to wear as a college coach, as opposed to.
Does he have to do all of that though with the new? It's not required of him. See, and that's where, Franklin delegated a lot of football responsibilities, X's and O's, but picked up the slack with, hey, academics, recruiting, because he liked doing that stuff. He enjoyed doing that stuff. Yes, he still coached, but he wasn't as involved. So that's kind of the argument that, well, Penn State needs to move on from Franklin as it is, because he's not truly a football guy. And please understand what I'm saying with respect to it, okay? There are more, you see it on game day. There are people that just outcoach him left and right. He's still a good football coach and a program manager, but when it comes to the X's and O's, everyone that I've seen, well, that's questionable, but he checks every other box. So why not have the inverse of that? Where, it's questionable how Daboll would handle all of that stuff. But what if you form a staff with the new NCAA regulations where you had limits on your recruiting staff? You couldn't have a GM. Okay. And I know Penn State as we're recording this, Penn State is expected to lose its general manager. But if you do just delegate those responsibilities, boost your recruiting staff. And the pitch is, hey, you're playing in an NFL environment. This is going to be an NFL development that is led by the guy that started Josh Allen's development, that turned him into an all-pro quarterback. And that's the reason he landed the New York Giants job to begin with. I do think there's some appeal there. And And again, Daboll, I want somebody that's going to want to be at Penn State. He's a Penn State dad. Like he already has a connection to the university from an emotional standpoint. It's not going to be to the extent of Terry Smith, but there is this aspect of him caring about where he's at.
No, definitely. And listen, I mean, I like Daboll a lot, and I think that would be part of the selling point for him. Would be like, excuse me, would be the fact that, you know, recruiting staffs can have multiple people now. That the fact that you can have like a GM, and I know you mentioned, right, Andy Frank at Penn State, currently the general manager. I will say, like, I think for Penn State, like ideally what this like GM spot is going to be is somebody that I'm not going to say like is on the same footing as whoever the head coach is, but definitely has like a little bit more pull with, okay, they're not just flat out answering. Because James Franklin at the end of the day was Andy Frank's boss. Like that was GM in name only, not GM in actual like what he was doing. No offense to Andy Frank. So, but yeah, that's whenever Brian Daboll, and right, the Reese Feldman report that there was mutual interest on both sides, Daboll interested in Penn State has some interest in Daboll as well. Whenever Daboll talks with Pat Kraft, whether that's informally or formally, in person or over Zoom, like whatever the interview process is like, that's going to be the question that he has to answer. Like, how am I going to deal with NIL? Who am I going to have as my GM? Who are going to be my recruiting staffers? All these questions that we aren't privy to have the answers to, that Pat Kraft will. And maybe Daboll comes in, he says, I'm going to have this guy as my GM. I have these recruiting staffers that I know from the Saban Rolodex. Maybe he comes in and says, I'm not that big on NIL. You know, I'll give them all 70,000 split across. And then that would just be the end of it. So I like the idea of him. But again, going back to what I said in the beginning, I do have that self-awareness of like, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know the answers that Pat Kraft will. We don't have the answers to the questions that Pat Kraft are going to be asking these guys. But man, I love the idea of Daboll, and I think like culturally he's a good fit. As you said, literally a Penn State dad. He can wear the T-shirt on the sideline, Penn State dad, and just like generally a Northeast guy. I know he's from upstate New York originally, so I think like he would just fit in really well within the community and stuff like that.
There is a niche, there is a fit for everybody. I'm not here to say that, oh, Daboll's exactly a direct fit, but you don't know. But there are signs that are there, as we've mentioned again. And New York City, yeah, he's connected to New York. But do you notice how the difference between the New York Giants and the Buffalo Bills? Like New York City is completely different from the rest of the state of New York. Not that needs explained, but it is worth pointing out that it's just, how many people can fit in with the New York Giants? Sometimes at the end of the day, it's just about a cultural fit. And there are signs that point to Daboll potentially being that. Again, I'm looking for upside. I'm looking for something different. When you mention Eli Drinkwitz to me, when you mention Manny Diaz, Matt Rule, what is different from James Franklin than any of those three? Questionable in big games. Their recruiting certainly not as good. And they don't have, Matt Rule is completely different, but he's off the board now, right? With the extension of Nebraska. I'm just trying to point out an example is I want someone that is going to be radically different from James Franklin, either in, football respects or personality, that kind of, then handle recruiting the way that you would need to. Okay. So, but just something, because then it just gets Penn State back to the same point. It's like, here we go again, 9-3, 10-2, Ohio State, Oregon, whenever Michigan's peaking, or maybe it's Indiana in this cycle, right? Somebody else is going to keep Penn State in tier 2 within the Big Ten. You need somebody that's going to be able to take you a step forward. And Brian Hartline would do that. I think Bob Chesney can do that. Brian Daboll, I don't have maybe necessarily as much confidence, but the upside is there, even though the downside is there too. Still to come on this episode, the James Franklin effect. What impact will he have now at Virginia Tech to hurt, to hinder, to limit what Penn State can do with its next head coach? Does that mean former players, recruits, coaches? All coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. College football, we all love it. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing else like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you got to use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can pull up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, you'll see amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. And if you've never been to a stadium, if you've never been to a venue, this is where Game Time really comes in handy. You'll get a point of view ahead of time when you select your seats. So you can see what your point of view is going to be from those seats. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And that is promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today.
And to be fair, like I do want to point out, like when it comes to like Eli Drinkwitz, and maybe this is something that we can talk about with James Franklin as well, and him going to Virginia Tech, like college programs, especially compared to like NFL programs, are like so unique. Like how I view Eli Drinkwitz at Penn State versus how I view him at Auburn is completely different. Like I think he'd be great at Auburn.
Yep.
He was 1 point at Auburn with Gus Malzahn at one point.
Yeah, quality control. Yep.
Yeah, and just even like where Auburn is at, where, you know, Auburn, like Virginia Tech, is at a spot where it'd be like, hey, you know what'd be cool? Going 9-3, going 10-2, and squeaking into the playoffs. Like that is where those programs are at right now. It doesn't mean that in 4 years after going 9-3 and 10-2 that they wouldn't want more. But at this point, it's like we're seeing with the Virginia Tech fans and James Franklin, and even the media like lauding them getting James Franklin. It's because Virginia Tech hasn't been in those spots. Like Virginia Tech fans would love to go 10-2 next year, and the year after that, and the year after
he elevates them.
Yeah, right. It's about elevating the program, and right, that's like what Penn State is looking at. Unfortunately, our elevation of the program is above 10-2, and that's like a really hard ask, and it's hard to find a coach that can do that. So, like you're saying, I think like you do kind of need to like. I just think it's important to think outside the box and not to simply just cut anyone off because like there is no coach out there that just checks all these marks. Like I know I've been arguing with people on Twitter about this. Like if Penn State wants someone that flat out has a better resume and is a definitive and clear upgrade over James Franklin, I don't know if that guy is out there. Like that's realistic, right? Like I'm sure there's an argument, right? Kalen DeBoer would have a better resume, but
he
like
does.
Actual realistic guys. So what, are you just going to have James Franklin forever until like that guy becomes available? Because that guy might never come available. Like at some point you need to make a move, and maybe Penn State hires Bob Chesney and he goes 7-5 and 8-4, and then he goes 7-5 in year 3. And then guess what? They'll fire him and they'll try again. Like that's
kind of the fear though, is that Penn State, you know, is Penn State going to give you 5, 6, 7 years to actually reach that potential, or is it after year 3 you're done? So that's kind of the initial concern when we talk about it. You know, James Franklin. So let's start to bring James Franklin into this conversation as well at Virginia Tech, because I've seen people that are already arguing that, oh, Penn State's going to struggle and Virginia Tech's going to win more games than Penn State over the next 3 to 5 years. Potentially, because the ACC schedule is easier, that you're not playing Oregon, you're not playing Ohio State, you're not playing Michigan, you're not playing USC. Oh, but there's Clemson, there's Miami of Florida. Again, I will default back to you are not playing Oregon, you are not playing Ohio State, you're not playing Michigan, you're not playing USC, all in potentially the same schedule. Now that's going to be divvied up in some regard for Penn State's immediate schedules. But and depending on when Penn State makes this hire too, like we still don't know. And that's kind of the benefit at this point for Virginia Tech and James Franklin. Now that it's officially in place and everybody knows, okay, this is what's what. It's not rumors anymore. It's not about guessing. It's not about what's likely versus unlikely. It is. It happened. And Franklin, so recruits are going to see that I guess current players at Penn State, former Franklin players. Like I fully expect a decent amount of players to follow James Franklin, especially when I think of Tony Rojas, Anthony Donko, maybe Amari Campbell. Again, he's from Virginia, but he's not a Franklin guy per se, right? He's truly a free agent, right? But he was at North Carolina. So all of those Virginia Tech, maybe some Maryland connections, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But here's what I do know is that Franklin is going to try like all heck to do it. And that's why if you're thinking about 2026, then you need to get your coach not to salvage what's left of the Penn State roster necessarily, but to go and build in the transfer portal, because you got to start your own recruiting and lay your foundation. And you might get some people that say, hey, I still appreciate Penn State, right? Like, would a Cooper Cousins follow Franklin to Virginia Tech? It's possible, but I don't know that it's likely. I can sit here and say, in my opinion, that it's likely that Tony Rojas goes home. And it's likely that Amari Campbell does, and Anthony Donko, or, just start naming players. What do you think Grunkemeyer follow? And then would you want Ethan Grunkemeyer to go because your coach is going to bring in his preferred quarterback?
Yeah, like it is simply just a reality of college football that this type of stuff is going to happen again, unless you go with Franklin until the wheels fall off. But even then, like from everything we know about James, like unless he was going to coach for the next 15 years at Penn State, like Penn State was not going to be the last place that he coached. So even if he coached Penn State for 3 more years and then decided to leave, and he took a lateral move to, let's just say Virginia Tech, right? In 3 years or 4 years, something like that. Like this was always going to happen. It's just simply a case of transfer portal era in college football. Like as much as we'd like to think that all these guys are at Penn State because they love Penn State, they also, as James mentioned time and time again, like this business is about relationships, and those guys have relationships with James Franklin and a lot of these assistant coaches. We'll see who follows. I assume that there will be multiple Penn State assistant coaches that will be at Virginia Tech in a couple of weeks. So it is inevitable that some of these players are going to go, but that's just like Which
coaches are you thinking? Because some of them are Penn State grads. Maybe Trace McSorley. Because people aren't going to care if Danny O'Brien and Marcus Higgins follow along. But Dan Connor, I don't think Anthony Poindexter being a UVA grad, right?
If I had to pick Danny O'Brien for sure. Mm-hmm. Trace, yes. That hurts my heart to say that. But yes, okay. Trace. I do think Trace has more loyalty to James than Penn State. And I understand, right? This is a business for him. Like he's trying to make money, make a career out of this, provide for his family. Like listen, Trace will come back to Penn State at some point. I'll make sure of it. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think Drayton. I don't necessarily. Hal's a tough one because Hal was not a Franklin guy originally. I think he played. I don't think he played
Paterno and Bill O'Brien.
But he coached a lot under Franklin.
Yep.
Troutwine, truly no idea. I could see him trying to make a move to the NFL if he can parlay. I know this season has,
or go to Virginia Tech. He has no. I'm mainly focused on Ty Howell, Deion Barnes, Dan Connor, Jim Knowles probably not going to follow to Virginia Tech, and there's the idea that you could keep him around because he has such a lucrative contract, and then. Within the college football circles, like people still think Jim Knowles is one of the better defensive coordinators. And it's like, oh, great. You get a longtime legacy defensive coordinator to give you a head start. And his system, depending on who you keep, is going to go into year 2, but not if your roster's completely turned over. So
I guess it's easier to say who I think would be most likely to stay at Penn State. Jim Knowles, just based on the contract. Mm-hmm. Dan Connor, I do think stays at Penn State. I don't think he has that strong of ties to Franklin necessarily.
Terry Smith?
Yes. I mean, Terry Smith has he might as well get a tattoo on his forehead that says
I love Penn State. I heart Penn State. I heart PSU.
Which is just awesome, man. Just awesome. Those are probably the only guys that I would feel confident in. Ty Howell, truly no idea. That again, for Ty Howell, it's probably pretty important who they hire. Do they use 2 or 3 tight end sets the way that we know that James Franklin is most likely going to operate? That is probably if you're a tight end coach, you probably want your tight ends to be on the field as much as possible. So it's really hard to decide who is going to stay at Penn State and who isn't based upon not knowing who the head coach is going to be. But those would be Jim Knowles, Dan Connor, and Terry Smith. I think are the ones that you feel pretty strongly about. But Yeah, just to say like just about James, and I know we mentioned like some of these Penn State players leaving and going to Virginia Tech, but just even like recruiting in general, like listen, this next year James is going to be a real pain in the ass. Like I will let you guys know that right now. Like Virginia Tech
It'll be annoying.
Yeah, Virginia Tech has had some down years. Justin Fuente was an idiot when it came to recruiting. He flat out just like was not good at it, did not know how to do it. Brent Pry was fine, but never had like the NIL backing and like the infrastructure. Not that I think like Virginia Tech is going to have like Texas Tech or Miami money, but I do think that I don't think James goes there if he's going to be like back half of the ACC. I think they're going to at least have like top 6-ish resources.
Rumors top 3.
That seems a little rich for me, especially with Miami and SMU.
That's a rumor. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. That's the rumor.
No, I gotcha. But even right, so I think that they will be competitive. I think James will do a good job of keeping a lot, especially you always get the new coach bump, and like that is one of the important things that Penn State fans need to remember. Like Penn State fired 2025 Franklin, they didn't fire 2019 Franklin, and Virginia Tech is hiring like this brand new toy. Like when Penn State fans said that like firing James Franklin is best for all parties, like this is what we're talking about. It gives James the opportunity for a restart, a refresh, a reset, whatever reword you want to use at a school as well. So he's going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to recruit like hell. He's, I'm like I'm saying, I'm sure he's going to have some pretty decent NIL backing. How he uses that NIL, we'll see. That was, a bit of an issue sometimes at Penn State when it came to recruiting high school kids, but it will be okay. Like the college football world is big enough where Virginia Tech can be 9-3, 10-2, 11-1 win the ACC, and Penn State can win a lot of games as well. So not the ideal. I would have rather have seen Franklin go to Arkansas. I would have rather have seen Franklin go to UCLA, where he's a little bit farther away from the region, but Penn State will be okay one way or another.
I think, the next 1 to 2 years, it's going to sting. But then after that, that's when you'll see kind of the parting of it's going to hurt, so to speak, now, because it's going to be a direct punch with players in the portal, so much movement. You can't get attached to any of these players. That's what I think, in this new era of college football, the era that we're in, your favorite player could be here today, still here tomorrow, and then gone the next day. And that's why it's really tough. And especially when, NFL careers, 10, ideally, right? 10, 15 years of seeing your favorite player show up on Sundays. And again, your favorite player, the person that you look up to on Saturdays, might be there for a year. Sometimes if that, they might even quit on the team in the middle of the season. So with that being said, that's a completely different conversation. Always great stuff with Pat Koerbler, Black Shoe Diaries. Links to his work will be down in the description. Thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. To each and every one of you out there, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Also, leave a like. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section to be a part of the conversation. Pat, it is always great to talk to you. I mean that sincerely, and can't wait to have you back on the show as the coaching carousel continues for Penn State, or when they finally make a decision.
Maybe that day will never come. Maybe this is just our life now. It's just talking about different coaches. Maybe take the season off. We see how everyone does, and then we make our decision there. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it as always.